Now we're on a hot mic. Huh? Yeah. All right, it is 12 p.m. and I call to order the ad hoc committee meeting of the Board of Trustees. This committee is charged with the responsibility of reviewing Section B, school board governance and operations. The committee will review all B policies and make recommendations to the board at large for revisions to these policies. The district is in compliance with the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act by notifying the media of the date, time, and place of the meeting. The district tapes the meeting for accuracy in preparing the minutes. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
I make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Do I have a second? I will second. And as far as discussion, any discussion?
No.
Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Committee members, you have received the minutes of the November 2nd ad hoc committee meeting. Other than corrections that have been received and made, are there any other corrections?
No.
Hearing none, the minutes will be accepted as presented. Since our November 2nd committee meeting, the board approved a contract for the South Carolina School Board Association to do a review of our existing policies and make recommendations. We received their recommendations and will begin reviewing drafts of their suggested policy revisions. We previously set up a roadmap to guide us on the order in which to review the policies. Our sections are who we are, what we do, how we do it, and miscellaneous other policies. Today, we will begin reviewing the Who We Are section. There are 10 policies for consideration in this section. Depending on the discussion, we may not get to all of them today, and we'll table the remainder until the next committee meeting. We will place a hard 2-hour stop on this meeting, and probably moving forward, that'll be the direction we go to be considerate of time. And anything that is left will carry over to the next, and then upon review, we'll go from there. So with that, we will begin our discussion of the B policies, beginning with BA, Board Operational Goals. You have received a packet that outlines the corrections or additions or deletions or suggestions completed by the South Carolina School Board Association and submitted to us for consideration. Again, these are for consideration, and prior to us submitting this to the board at large, we will go through these one by one and note any corrections, any differing opinions we may have, and at that point present a finalized version to the school board at a later meeting. So, beginning with BA, at this point I will open it up for discussion regarding any of the highlighted areas provided. All right, well, I'll start us off. Okay. So in looking at policy BA, couple thoughts that came to mind. If we skip down to the second paragraph that starts, the board will function. If we look at sentence 2, the board will provide the best possible educational program to address the educational needs of the students in the district and will accomplish this goal by efficiently managing district resources. So one consideration I had there was, by saying the board, I think it's very important for us to realize our role and responsibility and function, and for us that's through policy. And so one recommendation would be to consider the board through policy will, and then I did circle the question, or had a question regarding provide. And I would be curious to hear sort of district sort of input regarding, when we look at the terms provide, program, and managing all within that sentence, Those are ones that I guess I have some questions regarding what is the role of the board, responsibilities of the board. And, you know, one of the common themes that you hear is that we're not managers. We're not managers. We're not in the day-to-day operations. And so just by simply having the word managing in there, it does make me wonder if that runs counter to sort of our roles and responsibilities.
Right, so in the current policy, in the recommendation, it says by efficiently managing. In the current one, it talks about management. But I wonder, that's a really good point, if we change that word to overseeing, so educational needs of the students in the district, and will accomplish this goal by efficiently sort of managing district resources. But I do like adding the word policy, and the board will provide the best possible, the board through policy. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I was thinking the board, comma, through policy, comma, will
provide.
And I had the question, foster, you know, we see the word provide there. You know, when it comes to the educational programs of the district, we're not the ones teaching those.
I guess, though, we are financially approving
Correct.
anything they purchase.
Mm-hmm.
To address education. I know, we hear all the time about managing versus.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And again, even the term, the best possible educational program, I have a little bit of an issue with the term program, just
Puts
because.
a lot of things in a box, right?
It does. It does. In my opinion, programs don't encapsulate who Lexington One is. It's a part of who we are, but it doesn't encapsulate that. So I don't know if there's a better term or a way of structuring that. Dr. Little, in your experience, have you, the term program to encapsulate what District One does?
Or the challenge with the word program is that we talk about having programs, and typically those are more specific to maybe a particular school or a. Into the mic, my dad would be disappointed. Normally he would always tell me, get in the microphone. That's what happens when your father is a music teacher. But you have, I mean, just from talking about program, I think the challenge with the program is that it connotates like an immersion is a program, right? It's something specific to a school or a content area. Here, I mean, what they're trying to do is talk about the educational, they're trying to make program
All
this big,
encompassing,
all
yes.
kind of the umbrella.
Correct.
But certainly, I mean, I could see if you're going to get on a word, that would be a word that I would think about, because it is it's really, I mean, what you're talking about is really who we are as a district and what we do day to day across the board. And that feels more, I think there's more to that than just saying it's a program.
Right, well, in the current policy, it says,
You tell me where you want me to go.
hang on, let me find it. During that same similar paragraph, it talks about employing a superintendent under whose leadership they will carry out and so maybe, and I'm totally just brainstorming here, Kyle.
Well, that's what we're here for.
The board will provide the best possible educational program. Maybe the board will employ a superintendent to choose or direct or address.
What about experience?
I had environment or
Environment,
experience, something along
okay.
those lines.
Okay.
Because experience captures a number of things and maybe provides some, so for what that looks like for a student that has a high level of special needs, that educational experience looks different than maybe a student who doesn't. Like if you have a self-contained and, wheelchair bound that needs medical assistance to attend school, that's an educational experience. Their educational
Yeah.
experience is different. But it's still a quality educational
Because then it goes on to say
experience.
to address the educational needs of the students in the district. I like changing program to experience.
I would agree.
Now
So the board, through policy, will provide the best possible educational experience to address the educational needs of the students in the district and will accomplish this goal by efficiently managing district resources. So again, hitting this term managing,
Yeah.
is there a substitute? And I think it's an important point to put forth here. That's the purpose of this committee is honestly to really kind of tear these words apart, to get down to the absolute lowest common denominator, because what we have been provided is it's in compliance with South Carolina Code of Law. So a lot of these boxes have already been checked. And so now we're really getting into the wordsmithing of it. And so it's perfectly fine if we spend 15 minutes on a single word. Not that we're setting that goal, but the point being that really getting into the weeds on this is very important for us. So go ahead.
Yeah, so district resources. So when I think resources, I think money.
I would agree.
And so efficiently managing district, I don't want to change that word to money, but just as we're talking through this. But we do have a CFO, a financial department who manage those resources. So would it be appropriate to change the word manage to oversee?
If we skip over, just for resource purposes, if you skip over to BBA, you will see the breakdown of the powers and duties of the board.
Right.
And so that's one place I commonly go to just make sure, lane-wise, I'm mentally staying within and behaviorally staying within my lane. And so as we look at managing district resources, I kind of put that into the appraisal and approval. I put it into the executive bucket. And so I see it more as an oversight role as opposed to a in-the-weeds management of it. So maybe overseeing is a better term. I don't know. That would be a suggestion.
So the board, through policy, will provide the best possible educational experience to address the educational needs of the students in the district and will accomplish this goal by efficiently overseeing district resources. Are you writing?
Yeah, I'm just
thinking.
Yeah, I'm just putting some of my, yeah. So she'll be making red line changes to the policy.
And so the way this will work is, in our March meeting, we will bring for like a first reading. Well, you don't have to do multiple readings when there's an ad hoc committee.
Well,
right?
and I think that's going to be a source of discussion for us, to be honest, because technically, if you look at the spirit of the way we conduct policy, this would be in the spirit of a first reading. Now, I think we need to run that through the full board before we obviously take action or anything like that. But I would potentially see this as a first reading, then it could be provided. Then it could be provided to the board for review, comment, and then come forth for final approval. Now, whether we break that up or whether we consolidate that into a,
Well, remember how, if I could just sort of also jump in about what we've done traditionally, I say traditionally, over the last at least couple of years.
sure.
There's been like an introduction, then the first read, then the second read. So there's been almost like 3 readings of it.
Correct.
You know, you just kind of let people know that it's coming. But I think in this particular case, as an ad hoc committee, you are made up of members of the board. And I think that probably counts as like an introduction. And you could do a first read, and then the next month you could do a second read if you want to do it. I would just kind of tell you from a timeline perspective, if each thing does this, then 3 more months to make a decision, it's going to be a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of time there. And I think that the reason you have the ad hoc committee is for members of the board to already be engaged and active in this process.
Correct. Yeah, so and obviously we don't want to rush it. We want to make sure that the board has full time to digest it. And so, presenting this for first reading and then action upon the second would fit with the way we have done things up until this point. So, Dr. Little, any comments regarding the managing versus oversight from district perspective?
Well, I thought it was interesting that you brought up from the board level responsibilities. I think that language should be consistent throughout. And I think when you have a chance to make a specific and intentional language decision, I kind of have that type of language in, because it does matter when you talk about management versus oversight, those kinds of things. So I think it's a wise thing to filter those verbs throughout when you're talking about the board is going to do something. It really ought to be based upon what the roles and responsibilities are of the board.
Kathy, any comment regarding that, or?
I mean, just from a philosophical perspective.
Yeah, no, I was just looking to see if I saw any words in BBA that jumped out that would. Yeah, I think we should change the word managing.
Okay.
I think that we employ people to carry out the management of the district.
Okay.
That's just my opinion.
So oversight, so is overseeing, is that an appropriate
But
word?
because through oversight, we're still making sure the district is efficiently managed.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, it does nothing regarding responsibility. I mean, ultimately that doesn't change. It's, but it does, I think it does properly align roles, if you will. Okay. So paragraph 3, anything additional? Correct.
Yes.
And program to experience.
And adding the policy through policy.
So I have that sentence reading, the board, comma, through policy, comma, will provide the best possible educational experience to address the educational needs of the students in the district and will accomplish this goal by efficiently overseeing district resources. Okay.
Thank you. So you had asked about the third paragraph. I like the third paragraph. I do want us just to remember what this says as we go further into our B policy, for things like where it says the board will function publicly, which we do, and will seek the input of community, students, and staff, which we do, when applicable, in its decision-making processes. But the seeking the input of the community, I just want us to remember that when we get back further
Sure.
into our policy, like, as we dig into how are we going to do that?
Right,
And are
absolutely,
we doing it effectively or not?
absolutely. All right.
But I like that paragraph.
Yeah, I had no substantive
Yeah.
changes in my review on it. The board will establish a culture of competence, collaboration, and trust. I'll admit, this one, it feels like a ... You know, it's like, for whom? You know, everybody, us? I think it's directed for us internally, but I don't know what this adds, to be honest. It feels like it's a carryover from possibly the previous policy, and so I don't know, I mean, to me, those are all kind of understood. And if in any event, I would probably align it more towards shared values or align it with district language that we use if we're going to put that, I would seek to align it with current language of the district. Because it throws a lot in there, like, we'll establish, okay, by what mechanism? By what?
Right. I think, though,
Oh, I see what they did. I'm sorry, go ahead, Kathy, because
it's through the other policy.
Yeah,
And
it's
I
a carryover from that last.
Right.
so what they did was, in the previous policy, they attached it to that with phrase at the end of that. This kind of feels like my old English teacher days right here, but they grabbed the prepositional phrase in
Yep.
the third one. And so that's the qualifier that you just asked about.
Are you gonna make me diagram this thing?
No, I won't-
I
I'll
have
make you-
I have not done that in a long
I
time.
would
But
love
that
to
is,
do
that is
that.
the qualifier. So with input from students, regarding the quality and performances of the school district, the district will establish a culture of confidence, collaboration, and trust. That's the difference in the two things.
So that last sentence in the third paragraph, the board will function publicly and will seek the input of the community, students, and staff when applicable in its decision-making process, establishing a culture of competence, collaboration, and trust. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, just bump that back up to the third paragraph? Or you're just saying,
I'm just trying I guess I'm trying to figure out I do know that sometimes you have to overstate things and, but I wonder, I just had a note, you know, the way it's written currently, when it's divided out, it, to me, leaves a for whom, through what mechanisms,
right, that's why it probably needs to either, if it's gonna stay, it needs to go back up to the third paragraph.
Or you could connect it to the board goals. Because essentially what this is saying is, even though it's not saying it, so that's why we're looking at it, in order to establish a culture of competence, collaboration, trust, the board will, and then you have all the bullet points. So as it exists, I tend to agree with Dr. Guyton in that as a standalone statement, it actually does not do anything for the policy, right? So it either needs to go like it was in the old policy, where it's connected to that third paragraph in some form or fashion, or you connect it to what the board is going to do, because that's what, in order to create a culture of competence, collaboration, trust, the board will, and then you give all the bullet points, boom, 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 boom.
yeah, I definitely envision it as more of an action item. And so to me, the bulleted list are the action items of the goals, of the operational goals of the board. And so I agree, probably a better place, if it's gonna be a standalone, is gonna be down in this bulleted list, because then you can actually answer that question, okay, to establish, well, how? How are you going to establish it?
Because
And
it says accordingly, that's the next sentence begins with accordingly,
Right.
which again, doesn't actually connect it.
Right.
Right, if I were grading the paper, I would have said you need to connect it more clearly to your group.
So, so the consideration would be to move it down to the bulleted list.
But not as a bullet, to include it in the sentence above the bulleted list?
Yeah, it frames the bulleted list.
Correct, correct.
Purpose of the bullets is to create
Right.
this culture of
Yep.
trust and competence and collaboration.
So accordingly, the board's goals, all right, so tell me how that would read.
I would just say, I would do it in order to.
Instead of accordingly.
In order to
because-
establish a culture of competence, collaboration, and trust, the board goals are as follows. Or the board will work to, or something along those lines.
Okay. Any comments regarding that, Kathy?
No, that, I like moving that down to the sentence before the bulleted points. Because then in the bulleted points, we talk about everything from, so the culture of competence, collaboration, and trust. Competence, we're hiring the superintendent and working responsibly with them, maintaining effective communication with the public. So that touches on the competence, the collaboration, meeting the needs of the community, that's the trust part. So then the bulleted points do reference all three of those.
Okay. So moving on to the actual bulleted items. Any comments regarding the bulleted items?
I just find with things like this, it's almost as if they're so vague yet so specific.
Right, right.
You know, like the first bullet, to provide leadership through clearly defined written policies based on a thorough understanding of the district's educational program, there's that program again, and in consultation with individuals and groups affected by those policies as appropriate. So it's like really, really specific, and then it says as appropriate. So who defines the appropriate?
That's right. And that does bring up a good point, do we want to look at this word program again? To
I
maintain
will be
consistent
honest,
language.
I think using the word program is dated. I think that education has changed. Let's see. Well, this was revised in 2017. It was originally written in 1983. I like the educational experience.
Mhm.
I really do. We'll put that in the check column for Dr. Little.
To change program to experience?
From the educational standpoint, I think so. But
And should district be capitalized throughout this, or should it remain lowercase? Lowercase, okay. Under to choose the superintendent and work responsibly with him or her, I just had changed choose to employ. I think that, again, just sort of sets up, because again, if you reflect back to the powers and duties, executive, the board will employ a superintendent to serve. So to me, that's,
I'm
that's,
sorry, where do you want to change that?
the bullet to number 4 bullet, it says to choose the superintendent and work responsibly. I would change choose to employ,
Oh,
to
yeah.
employ the superintendent. Because that just maintains consistent language with powers
Yeah,
and
I
duties.
like that.
Just to be clear, just as long as it's understood that you're talking about the selection process as part of the employment, I guess that works.
I think that's inherent within the term employ, because obviously we wouldn't be able to employ without having
Choosing
gone
through the
through that
selection
process. Yep.
Yeah, so employ, hire, recruit, take on, give work to, so hire.
You know, can I say something about program again? I hate to go back to that.
Yeah, do you
I
want
mean,
to keep?
well, I hate that we're 35 minutes in and
We're
not-
still,
not-
I
Hey,
know.
that's, you know,
Y'all.
that's
But
okay.
you said it was a hard 2-hour out, so.
It's a hard to,
So,
hard
so
to
here's what I
understand.
would say, though. If you said understanding of the district's educational programs
Plural.
and turned it into a plural, I think it makes more sense compared to what you've done earlier. Or you could say the district's educational experiences. I think that would work too. I think if you turn it into a plural, it makes it, because you should have a thorough understanding of, you know, you're not, as a board member, you're not gonna know everything that's done every
With
single
those new
day.
board visits, you just
Well,
wait.
that's what I'm
Kathy
saying.
Henson's gonna know.
I'm very excited. I think it's gonna be really cool. But I mean, but you don't have to be like an expert in EL education or whatever it is. I just think it, so by saying programs,
Yeah.
you're recognizing that there's a lot happening, or you could come out again, you could like, instead of going down into more of a, what might be a you know, being in the weeds, you could talk about like a thorough understanding of the district's educational goals,
Practices
or,
yeah.
you know, philosophy, or, you know, kind of depending on how you look at it, right? I mean, I'm not an
Right,
expert in reading
yeah.
recovery. I know it. I mean, we just used that last month, so we'll just use that as an example. I couldn't sit down with a student and do reading recovery,
Right.
right? That's why we have really highly trained, incredible teachers to do that. But I understand what it is and why we're using it.
Right.
So again, I just want to make sure we don't pin you down on something that you feel like you have to have a thorough understanding of every program in the district. Because there's not, I mean, I don't know there's enough time to do that kind of stuff.
Well, I even had circled the word thorough, because that, again, exactly what you're talking about. We meet once a month, outside of our special called meetings. So is it even possible? And the answer, in my opinion, is no, it's not possible to have an absolute thorough understanding of every program. I mean, every time I come into a meeting, it is an educational experience for me, because the entire reading recovery program that we went, for your example,
Right.
going through that was an entire educational experience for me. I agree with you. Do I have a thorough understanding of it? No, I understand it much better than I did before. But would I go so far as to say that I have a thorough knowledge? No, I wouldn't. And so I'd even question having that term thorough in there, because it does seem like it's almost it's a little heavy-handed, in my opinion, for us to have a true thorough understanding, on top of everything else.
Of every educational program.
Correct. And I do like your point that we go from the generic to the specific. Educational experience is generic, programs are specific, philosophy is specific, those things are. And when I see bulleted items, I think specific. So
just throwing a little extra thought in there. It says to provide leadership through clearly defined written policies based on a thorough understanding of the district. And so as policies are written, we'll take dress code, for example. Through clearly defined written policies based on a thorough understanding of the district's whatever. So when the district brings things to us, they're bringing that thorough knowledge.
correct.
And so I don't know that, I don't know. Sometimes if you take the word thorough out, then it might not appear that we're really knowledgeable on what we're creating
Right.
these policies about.
Yeah, I definitely don't want it to set up a pass system where,
Yeah,
we give ourselves a pass and say, oh, I don't have to know that.
Right.
No, I don't agree with that. So that's why I didn't, in my mind, immediately strike it out of consideration, because it does serve a purpose for that word to be there.
because we provide leadership through clearly defined written policies based on thorough understanding. So I think we get that thorough understanding as we're writing those defined policies.
What about,
I don't know.
so, one of the things you have to be aware of is you don't want to put language in that if something's easily changeable, then you have to come back in and revote on the policy again and again and
Right.
again and again. But I wonder if it's really about, you have a thorough understanding of what our vision and mission are, and you want to base policies around that.
Instead of the district's educational programs.
Because it really
So
is
provide
about,
leadership.
because underneath that vision and mission
Mhm.
will be opportunities to learn about the educational programs, right? That's what the board visits will be a part of that. In fact, that's actually the ideal. We're trying to line up things in the strategic plan so you can see it in action. I wonder if that's maybe a better, I think it's just a better articulation of what we do. You know what I mean? So, because you do have a thorough understanding of vision and mission, and you see how that plays out. The programs are the vision and mission, the result of the vision and mission.
Mm-hmm.
And so you base those policies, not necessarily based on the programs, you base programs on, you see what I'm saying? It's almost backwards to me. You don't create policy based upon programs. You create programs based upon policy.
So it would read, to provide leadership through clearly defined written policies based on a thorough understanding of the district's mission and vision, and in consultation with individuals and groups affected by those policies as appropriate.
And it
And
also
strategic
challenges-
plan is the tool used to communicate
Well,
that.
and
So
it
that's
also-
inherent within.
Well, it also challenges future boards to make sure they have clear vision and mission statements.
Mhm.
Whatever that looks like in 2045.
Right. Yeah, I like that change, I think, a little more than, I don't like the way this currently reads with the district's educational program.
Now, to be clear, I think as board members, you should know about the educational programs
Absolutely.
that are taking place in the district.
Oh,
I
yeah.
just want to make sure I'm clear about that. But I'm saying, based on how it reads, I think it's better served to talk about this thorough understanding of vision and mission, because I think programs are a part of that vision and mission.
Correct. But, and to Kathy's point, not everything is an educational program. Some things fall outside the educational program. So for example, dress code, for example, tobacco policy, for example, whatever it may be. These are all things that we are writing policy for, that need to fall under an umbrella, and ultimately the best provider of the umbrella is our mission and vision, not the
Of the
individual.
culture here in
Correct.
Lexington one.
Correct.
Right,
Are you good with that change?
I am.
You got that, Tracy? Thank you. To employ the superintendent, okay, we got that change. To identify, this sentence is clunky to me, to identify the educational and technological needs of the community. I think we are, I think it's bigger than that. And I think I have difficulty with the term technological in there. That just seems like that was something thrown back in the 80s to say, man, there's a lot of stuff coming these days. There's this thing out there called the internet and all this other stuff, and it's gonna be a lot of technology. I wonder if when I look at the Lexington School District One, I see it as providing an experience for every possible child that comes through. And it doesn't matter if that's through secondary education, it doesn't matter if that's through workforce employment, it doesn't matter if that's through military readiness. I think all of those things fall under the mission and vision of Lexington One. And so if we're talking about the programs we're using to transform and the policies we are putting in place, I don't know if educational and technological needs of the community conveys that. It's almost like workforce needs. So to identify the educational and workforce.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, maybe having a close relationship with the community, even things like the Chamber of Commerce and stuff, knowing how to prepare these students, not that we don't know how to prepare students, but what are the needs that they're gonna need when they get out in the real world?
Well, so to give you a good example, so we introduced the phrase K to career last week
Right.
as part of the LINK program, or the LINK partnership. That's not really a program. It's anyway. See, I got myself in trouble using some dated language. It's not really a program. It describes our relationship and partnerships with businesses. I do believe that it will be essential for Lexington One moving forward that we note something about our relationships, our purposeful and intentional relationships with our local industry.
Absolutely.
Because part of what we do is, we're creating we have lots of responsibilities, but I think one of those responsibilities is we create a talent pipeline where students can be successful in what they do, their skills and experiences, where businesses are excited about Lexington One graduates. That's not all we do, but I think that's certainly a part of what we do, is that we are creating that talent pipeline because we want our students to be incredibly successful wherever they go. But we also want, I think as a citizen, I want to make sure that the students who decide to stay here, or the students who move back here when they go off to college and come back, that they are well educated and prepared for the jobs that we want to be able to attract to our community, right? So you always want to be a place where people want to come and come back to, as opposed to other communities perhaps that I've lived in where people graduate and they move away and they go to, Charlotte or Atlanta or, Greenville or Charleston or something like that. I think we also want to make sure that Lexington is a place that those graduates want to come back to.
Exhibit A, Exhibit B.
Or they stay here, or they never leave, and they stay here and then produce and contribute to our society and our citizenry.
Well, and it was, Lexington One education was foundational to my personal career path, and it was the needs of the community that brought us to Lexington to create our first practice. And so, this literally played out exactly how you would want, if you had to design a system. I lived that system. I lived this bullet point. Kathy, pretty much you did as well. And so, I firmly believe, only use 4 words if you can get away from using 10. And so maybe it's just to identify the needs of the community and to transform such needs into programs, and not specify educational, technological, workforce. Because we don't know, number one, we don't know what the needs of the community are 10 years from now or 50 years from now. But we know there will be a community. and we know it'll have needs. So maybe it's better to be somewhat generic for this bullet item. Comments?
So to identify the needs of the community and transform,
Yeah, kill the two and transform, correct.
those needs or such needs, period, or like into program,
No, I think that's,
well, maybe into opportunities,
Oh,
yeah, that's a good word.
you know, opportunities to prepare students for future careers. Because I think programs aimed is so strong language, like
Yeah.
we're trying to aim all of our students into these future careers, but we want to provide opportunities, if this is your interest in this, that we can help you get there. I don't know.
I think what is a strength of this district, just to your point, is we talk a lot about pathways.
Oh, yeah.
And we try to create these individual pathways for students. You know, I think about my oldest daughter, her educational experience,
Right.
getting her CNA is going to be probably pretty different than my youngest daughter's experience. That's going to have a lot of language involved.
Right.
So, to identify needs of the community and transform such needs into opportunities, preparing students for future careers?
Maybe not even, to identify needs of the community and transform such needs into opportunities.
I don't mind the aimed at. You know, I'm a firm believer of the, you know, of the old phrase that, you know, if you don't have a target, shoot at, what are you shooting at?
Okay, so into opportunities aimed at preparing students for future careers?
Mhm.
Again, that's not all we do, but I think that's I think it's an important part of what we do, and I think it's worth a bullet to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so,
Got it.
To identify the needs of the community and to transform such needs into opportunities aimed at preparing students for future careers.
not to add another word, but educational opportunities? Or just opportunities?
I think opportunities.
Just opportunities?
Yeah, because, you know, again, are they all educational? Yes, I think they all are educational, but,
Right.
but it's, because you're consistently learning about, say, you know, take ROTC, for example. You know, you're learning about what it means to be, you know, in the military. You're,
Military.
you know, so it still is educational, so I think that part's probably understood. All right, and the only other revision I had was on the last bullet, to review its performance relative to its goals, and instead of periodic, I had annual, because I think that's consistent in future,
So
future
that would be
policy.
like our annual.
Correct, that's our
Yes,
self-assessment.
Self-assessment.
So instead of periodic, it would change to annual.
I like that.
All right. It is 12:49. I wish to congratulate the ad hoc committee on the first.
Policy number one.
Oh, wow,
That
y'all.
was, hey, but you know, that's, again, we want it right. We don't want it rushed. And so, so be it. All right. Speaking of, this is a great carryover to the next.
Self-evaluation.
Board self-evaluation. Okay. So we are looking now at code BAA. Again, you have in front of you a recommendation from South Carolina School Board Association, along with our current policy. So we'll begin discussion of that. The highlighted portion that they provided in paragraph, or in sentence 2, to that end, the board will conduct annual self-evaluations. Again, that ties back into our last bullet point. during, and they've highlighted board retreats, special meetings, or regularly scheduled. Me personally, I would just eliminate that altogether and just say a called meeting.
I just say the board will conduct annual self-evaluations, period.
Yeah.
And then not,
Or you could just tie it into the next one, and the results of the self-evaluation will be reviewed each year.
And
Yep.
whenever we, and do we have to say when it's reviewed? Like,
Well,
Is it
and
wanting us
I
to
actually
say-
have that as a point of comment, or for discussion for us. So if we look at the timing of the annual evaluation of the board. So in my viewpoint, this is where the board takes a step back and says, okay, how are we functioning as a board?
so like January of this year
Correct,
is
correct.
what we did.
Correct, January, what we did this year.
Correct.
To me, there is a specificity of the timing. You know, I'm a firm believer, get your own house right before you go to fix the other house. And so I believe that it should dovetail in very well with when we begin to evaluate the strategic plan. And so, you know, we should be reviewing ourselves. We should have enough time to digest that. And then we should come on the heels of that and begin the work of reviewing the strategic plan and so on and so forth as we look forward to the next year, or any revisions. So I think timing does come into play. I think timing is important. I would just need a little more understanding of timing-wise, what does it look like, the natural flow of the district. I don't know if December and January are necessarily the best times for us to be doing this, because you're closing out one year and you're starting a new year and starting a new semester, and keeping in mind our fiscal year starts in July. And so it's, you know, there is a timing, I think, to this. So I'd be curious to hear from the district, you know, how do you foresee that playing out?
that's a interesting question, Dr. Guyton. So from a perspective of how it normally flows, you know, September, October are where we really reflect upon the previous year's experience,
Correct.
right? So that's why we spend a lot of time during those 2 months. We have the State of the State or the State of the District workshop in September. That then leads into the superintendent's evaluation in October. So that particular function is there. So the question, I think, from the board is, do you want to precede that, which would be July, August, or do you want to follow up on it in December, January? Now, I would also remind everybody is that every couple of years, you have a board election. So that at some point in that board election, you also have to remember we have to do board orientations and those kinds of things. So let's say it's November of 2022. In December, you have new board members that you have to orient to the district. You know, is it fair for their first thing to come on is to say, okay, everybody, you've been in your role for 2 weeks.
No evaluation. Let's
Go ahead and do a board evaluation and then plan for next year. I think that could be incredibly challenging. The other hard part is that if you wait too late in January, February, and March, you know, that year's already done, and you're really looking at towards the end with budget coming up. Now, although, let me say it this way, I think an argument could be made that March might actually be a really good time to do this prior to the budget. And you could actually mix in, you know how we've brought in budget priorities in March, and that's been part of the conversation. Actually, maybe, I mean, you could do an early March meeting and where we kind of do all that together, because the budget's one of your big rocks, right? So that's not a bad time to do something like that. But so I think you're really looking at early spring, right before the budget season, Or, excuse me, you're looking at July, August, prior to the examination of the strategic plan stuff that we're getting ready to do.
Well, I would lean towards the summer more than March. And I know you were talking about that being before budget and stuff, but I think if we look further down on this, when we're talking about the purpose of this evaluation, I don't think, so much for us to discuss budget. I think it's more so having dialogue about understanding our roles and responsibilities, identifying our strengths and weaknesses as a public body, improving decision-making. So to your point of new board members coming on, for me, I was elected in November, beginning of November, but then there was like a recount, and then it had to be so many weeks before. So it was like a whole month before I was even sworn in.
Correct.
And then that would give those people the opportunity to essentially get through the spring on the board, and then we could kind of come together and say, okay, here's some new eyes. Let's talk about how we are working as a board, how our decision-making and understanding of our philosophies and stuff, how that's going. And so I think, and just in education, I know we've got our semesters and we've got our fiscal years, the summer, and then when August starts, it's like a new year, essentially. And so I would say summertime.
Yes, again, I think it's where y'all kind of feel the most comfortable doing it.
Yeah.
The thing to remember is if you're thinking about, I think if you focus the conversation on what the board's planning on doing over the next year, I think July really helps you. But if you're thinking about sort of district stuff, that's probably not the most accurate term.
Right. So I think we're
That
talking,
July has already, the planning part has already been done. I mean, the hay's already in the barn, as my granddaddy used to say. And that part is already done at that point because the budget's been done. We're already acting on the budget and those kinds of things. But I like what you're saying in terms of the philosophical where we stand stuff as a body, as a public body, July, and I would actually say July. I wouldn't move it to August because August
school starts.
with so much stuff ramping up. But I mean, July probably is your best time for those kinds of conversations.
Yeah, so let's take an election year, for example, okay? So you come in and December's sort of the time a new board member hits the ground running, okay?
And then you only have one meeting in December, so then you're into January,
Yep,
so
yep.
it's like.
And so you've got orientation that's occurring there, we as a board are orienting the newest board member
And they
on
won't
how-
even do training until February at
Right.
that conference we just went to.
Well, and that kind of brings up a good point in that, that sort of that December, January, first part of February is sort of our time as a district to orient a new member to the way Lexington School District One does it. Then you hit the annual meeting in February, and that's really the time to kind of understand from a little bit higher level, the higher accountability, the higher, those higher type discussions and understanding comes then. And then, of course, in March is when we start to hit budget season. And so you're really talking about really heavy, it's a heavy lift, it's heavy conversations, it's a little taxing, and all the while as you come in, you're sort of hitting the ground running and you're trying to understand the complex nature of educational finance in preparation for a March discussion. So I don't know, I agree, I think the summer's probably that better time where you come out of that and you say, okay, now I've kind of got my wits about me. And this is, again, from a new member perspective. Now I can take a look at it and we can begin that
Right.
self-evaluation.
I probably would have not had anything valuable to add in March.
Yep.
And we also have to remember that while sometimes people run again, with our cycle being 4 and 3, there really could be a year where there are 4 new board members. And so then, 3 months in and you're trying to do an assessment
Yep.
or a self-evaluation. So yeah, I
Or
think
even 3 for that matter.
even
Yeah.
3, really. I mean, that is a lot. Yeah, definitely.
So we feel settled about July? I think
so.
timing wise,
Yeah,
I think that's a good time.
I think that sounds,
Okay. So in the asterisks, we would each year in July and use to establish board goals for the following year. And again, that lines up well with our fiscal year, as
Right.
we're, as we've adopted, because really as a new board member, you're kind of inheriting the decisions of the previous year, of the previous budget, so you're inheriting all of those things. And so, that first year is really kind of I won't say a bit of a wash, but, you're just then going on to oversight at that perspective. Okay, and so at the next regularly scheduled board meeting, the only thing I had different there is the board chair will provide a summary report of the process and results as opposed to make. That just seems like, I think it's more provide than make. Anything
fine.
additional for the first paragraph? Second paragraph, any input?
no, I like what you just said, or, is that what you're talking about?
What's that?
With that correction?
Yes, with that correction, changing from will make to will provide.
Yeah. So. Will the board chair, just looking at the next paragraph, where it says self-assessment by the board allows its members to systematically take an in-depth look at the board as a governing body to make sure it's discharging its responsibilities to the school community effectively. Who's in charge of planning the self-assessment or finding who's leading us through the self-assessment? Or is there tools we're going to use? Like, how in-depth do we need to get with this policy
Yeah.
regarding how that's going to look?
Honestly, I think that's where you need to have a little bit of flexibility for future boards. Because obviously you see at the bottom, School Board Association will assist the board with its annual evaluation by providing the assessment instrument and analysis. I think there is a much needed instrument and analysis that needs to occur. I don't know if every school board, every one of Lexington School boards moving forward will use the South Carolina School Board Association instrument. So I would have a little bit of difficulty putting that in policy, but by using the term systematically, I think that inherently says there must be an instrument. And the process by which that occurs, I mean, you've already set the expectation it occurs annually. It occurs in July. And then I don't know how specific we have to be about the actual process of that. And that's for discussion. I mean, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts.
I don't know what my thoughts are right now.
I mean, could you say, and this is sort of a strange policy conversation, what I'm getting ready to say, or a policy statement, but I wonder if you could say, you could encourage that, like the spirit of the policy, like you're talking about the spirit of the policy a little bit. You're breaking down the fourth wall and saying, self-assessment by the board allows members to the results of the evaluation provide valuable, and maybe say, the school board is encouraged to adopt a whatever you just said.
Well, what you could say is, it says the results of this evaluation, the results of this assessment instrument and analysis.
Because it doesn't tell us which one we have to
No.
use, but it's stating you will use some form of assessment tool.
Mhm.
I like, that makes me feel a little better that we're,
Or I mean, you could even, assessment tool, you could, instead of instrument, you could say tool. You could,
assessment tool, yeah.
yep. So the results, strike of the evaluation, the results of this assessment tool
Or,
and analysis will provide valuable information the board will use to build a unified body of effective leaders. Good with that?
yes, the results of,
Because that ties back to your systematic.
Right.
I mean, you have to have, that is, an assessment tool and analysis is your systematic approach. The only other thought I had was,
Can you read that one more time?
yep, so the results of this assessment tool and analysis will provide valuable information the board will use to build a unified body of effective leaders. Because then you're not hamstringing them, you're not hog-tying them into absolutely having to use
South Carolina
this
School Board
one
Association,
type
yeah.
of tool, but you gotta use something.
right, like all of us prior to our January meeting went through and answered all those questions. So that what I would say would be the tool that was
Correct.
used.
That's correct.
But not necessarily that we're gonna use that tool next
No,
July.
No, and you're providing the flexibility to future boards to
Right.
have, because there may be something new and profound that comes along. Maybe they want to use a personality inventory.
Right, but I
You
think
know.
this keeps it from the board getting together and let's just talk out what we
Yeah,
miss,
exactly.
going good and.
If you go back to the first sentence, discharging its responsibilities to the school community effectively, school community feels almost like a dated term.
Which sentence?
So it says, the first of the second paragraph, that first sentence, so going back one sentence,
Oh, yeah, okay.
the school community, I had put question mark, its responsibilities to the district and community effectively. Because ultimately, that's who we serve. We ultimately serve the school district, and we ultimately serve the community.
Yeah, but how that sentence is saying, self-assessment by the board allows its members to systematically take an in-depth look at the board as a governing body to make sure it is discharging its responsibilities to the school community. So the part that I feel like it's saying your role to the school community is probably, I don't know how to say it. But like the idea that, but what you're saying is the responsibility to the district and the community as a whole?
Well, I guess my question is, what is the aim there? When we use the term school community?
Well, when I read it here, it reads school community, I think of the district.
You think of the district?
I think when it says school community, I'm thinking I feel like it reads district.
That's how I read it, but sometimes I have to take a step back because I read things sometimes through my education lens. And so I think we probably should just hear what you're saying because you're reading it from.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where when we say, all right, so governing body, to me, it's the self-assessment is really the board taking an introspective look at saying, how well are we governing? And so through what lens are we looking at that through? Are we looking at it through how we're governing the district, how we're governing in compliance with the community needs? Where are we facing? And so for me, school community is just a confusing term. I don't know who does that include? And to your point, you're saying you read it as the district.
It feels like when it says school community, I feel like you're talking about the employees, you're talking about, parents, students, the people really touching this. I mean, I guess maybe based on our last conversation, businesses, maybe we have partnerships, those kinds of things. But I think really it feels like parents, students, and staff.
Okay.
Is what I
Sure.
is what I feel like that reads. Now, I would argue that your role as well as my role extend beyond that.
Correct.
Right? That we truly lead. It's also about it's community-led, because we do involve businesses, we do involve, that from an economic development perspective, Lexington District One drives economic development for Lexington. The reason so many people move here for the schools and it's an incredible location, incredible community, that also has incredible schools. We're really an economic driver for our community. So from that standpoint, I would certainly, I think an argument absolutely could be made that the leadership of the board extends beyond just the 32 campuses or whatever, plus central services and maintenance and those kinds of things. It's more than that. But how I read this sentence is it's talking specifically about the school community, and I read that as parents, teachers, and staff.
Good. And I'm certainly okay with that. I don't, I just had it there as a question mark. Any thoughts? Kim?
So the self-assessment wouldn't have us looking at whether or not we're discharging our responsibilities to the outside community? It would just be
I feel like that's what that sentence says.
So are
Well,
you
contrary
saying?
to that, though, our most recent one did, because that was one of our questions of our relationships with community members, so
Right.
on and so forth.
So then going from that, should we go back to what you were initially saying?
And say district and community.
Yeah. Because when I read school community, I think Lexington One, not, I'll just use my parents, for example. My parents live in the district, but the way this reads is the school community. So that's moms, dads, teachers, kids.
Those most
Employees.
immediately impacted.
I think your original sentence probably captures it better.
Better, yeah, I think so too.
Okay. So we're good with that change?
Yep.
Yeah, read it one more time.
So self-assessment by the board allows its members to systematically take an in-depth look at the board as a governing body to make sure it is discharging its responsibilities to the district and community effectively.
Yeah, I think that captures it.
Okay. All right. How about regarding the bullet points?
So this gives me so many questions. Like, we added at the top about a tool. So providing a baseline for effective goal setting and long-range planning. Who does that?
I had the same question. Well, no, I didn't. Mine was for whom?
Yeah,
The board or the district? I don't think it's for the district.
I think it's for us.
I think it's for the board.
That's why our original conversation about July matters.
Yep, that's right.
Right.
Because if you're waiting till July in a fiscal year,
It's already
Right.
passed by.
the planning's done.
Yep.
Well, actually, you've already done it.
Yep.
Because you created a budget that allowed the next year to take place.
Yep.
So
But I mean-
whether we meant to do that or not, that's already been done.
Right. So, but then effective goal setting, what kind of goal setting? Like goal setting saying, hey, we're going to set goals that we will attend this many professional developments. We're going to set goals of attendance. We're going to set goals of so many ad hoc committees or,
I think it comes out of your assessment tool and analysis. I think that's what gives you your goal setting. That gives you your bullet points, because you look at that and say, okay, this is where we appear to be strong, and this is appear where we need to be weak, and this is where we need to focus some attention. And so to me, I just think you need a qualifier to that. And long-range planning for the board. I think that's a point where you need to be specific
Yeah.
and say,
I think
this
so.
is not goal setting for the district, this is goal setting for the board itself.
And as we reflect, we could reflect on things like, hey, we did a great job this year with budgeting, but maybe next year we need to put a focus on the calendar or whatever. So it's looking back and looking ahead.
Anything else? I was mostly good with everything else. The only question I have, and again, this is a much more of a philosophical one, is the very last bullet point, demonstrating a willingness by each board member to hold each other accountable. I gotta admit, I struggle with that one a little bit. Because there's no inherent power we have to do anything about it. I mean, to me, once you're holding someone accountable, that implies, thank you, you have the ability to do something, thank you, Tracy, to do something about it.
Right, and when I-
and
go ahead.
outside of censuring or something along those lines, I mean, I don't think we have any basis by which to do that.
Yeah, when I read that sentence, I immediately went and read the board member conduct tab because, and that'll get into a discussion when we get to board member conduct
right.
about accountability there regardless, because there's not too much accountability there either. So I wonder if it's meaning
interesting.
a willingness by each board member to hold each other accountable to what we discuss in the self-evaluation? I don't know.
Do you see the last bullet on the previous policy?
Accountable to themselves in the district is what that one says.
Mm-hmm.
But it says holding the board accountable to themselves and the district
Was holding individual members accountable.
is what the new.
That sounds different than
Yes.
what is in this one. That seems like a fairly significant change.
Uh-huh.
It does. That to me was a very substantive change that I don't know if I necessarily agree with. Ultimately, in the position we hold as an elected official, the voting public is
holding
who
us
is who
accountable.
holds us
Right.
accountable.
Through
For the
their vote.
job that they thought is being done well or not being done well at all.
Right.
And so they have the ability to act upon that.
So do we even need that bullet?
I had that question mark.
I wonder if it actually, I like the other, or the board hold themselves accountable. I mean, like, so for example, if the board establishes goals, the board should act in a manner
That's consistent.
that is moving towards those goals, right? If the board is not moving towards those goals, I think it's incumbent upon the members of the board to talk about that. right? Now, again, I mean, you can't you're not giving somebody a red card or a yellow card or something like that,
Right.
but it's not a two-stroke penalty. But I think it is important that, again, if the board is establishing goal setting and long-range planning, and the board deviates from that, I mean, the board needs to have a conversation about that. So if in July you say A, B, and C, but come December you're doing D, E, and F,
Right.
or E, F, and G or something, then you go, okay, why are we doing that and not doing this other thing? Or you get to the next July and you say, listen, we overplanned. It doesn't need to be something confrontational. It might be we bit off more than we could chew for 1 year. So the next July, let's be more focused in terms of what our goal setting is. And I mean, organizations do that all the time, right? And they'll do a plan of something. That's one of the reasons our strategic plan is try to be so narrow in focus, is because if you create a strategic plan that has 200 goals, you're not gonna, you're never gonna do that much. And if you did that much, you'd wear everybody out, right? You'd end up, implementation saturation or innovation saturation is what it would be, and you'd have a fatigued organization just because they're implementing. So I do think it's important that, I don't know that you need the bullet, but in action, in theory, I think the board needs to have a conversation about the viability of the long-term goals, excuse me, the planning, whatever that may be, and then to discuss amongst themselves, hey, listen, it's December. Are we making progress towards these things?
Right.
What are we doing towards them? Have they been completely derailed? And I know you don't want to I wouldn't certainly do like another formal meeting, but I would encourage future boards to make that part of their process, is what I'm saying.
So really the option is, do we get rid of this bullet or find a way to phrase it to keep it? And so if we want to keep it, I think kind of merging the two, because at the top of the bullets, it says, the evaluation will assist the board by, and then the last bullet says demonstrating a willingness by each board member to hold each other accountable. But instead, we could go off of the previous thing and say demonstrating a willingness by the board to hold itself accountable.
Correct. I like that much better, because that's essentially, again, we are talking about a self-evaluation. So inherently, it is a tool of accountability.
Right.
Because you're having to answer difficult questions about your function as a board. And it's multi-looking. It's looking at the district, it's looking at the community, it's even looking at the internal function of the board. And so ultimately, I think it is unto itself.
Right, so demonstrating a willingness by the board to hold itself accountable.
I think that encompasses the spirit of what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. Because I don't think, to my knowledge, there's not a way for me to hold you accountable for your actions.
Yeah, I mean, outside of a conversation like, hey, what you doing here?
Or doing something illegal or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But again, we don't have the ability individually to act upon that. We don't have the ability
True.
to act individually upon anything.
Yeah.
Our power only exists as a board in its entirety. So, that, I would agree.
I like the board holding itself accountable.
Yep.
I think that's actually more realistic and more powerful.
Right, because that way Kyle could say, hey, guys, listen, we said we were going to do this, but we're not. We need to refocus and, yeah.
We are moving now. It's 1:25.
Hold
and
on.
we
I
have-
don't
now,
think,
hold
well, I
on.
shouldn't even say it. I was going to say, I don't think this next one's going to take as long, but who
Do I
knows?
hear a motion for a 3-minute adjournment, just so we can stretch our legs? Do I hear-
Sure, yes. I make a motion for a 3-minute.
I second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Actually, isn't just Kathy the one voting?
Yeah.
It's all up to Kathy. She
Well,
seconds it.
I think I have to.
She motions, seconds, and votes.
Just a quick 3-minute, stretch your legs. you. So we are back in session now. Moving on to policy BB, board legal status. Again, in front of you, you have our current policy, and then you have the proposed by the South Carolina School Board Association. Open that up for discussion.
In that first paragraph, last sentence, composed of 7 members who reside in designated areas within the boundaries of the county. The current policy says within the boundaries of the district. Should we change that to the recommendation of the county or keep it? Because we have to live within the boundaries of our district, because Lexington County has 5 districts.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, I was a
Wonder why.
little bit confused about that as well. To me, specificity on this is needed, not generality.
Right.
And so I honestly don't know what prompted them to
Well,
recommend that change.
A lot of our counties
Sure,
are
yeah.
a whole district in our
Correct,
state.
correct,
And so.
I just don't know if that was what they were used to working with, but obviously in Lexington, that's.
You're saying they have to live in Lexington One. That is a designated part of the county.
Yes, I see that.
Right. But I think how we said it before is actually better.
I think so too.
Yes, because this is saying designated areas within the boundaries of the county. And this is just saying reside within the boundaries of the
You got to
district.
be in the district.
Yeah.
The boundaries of the district.
It's kind of like a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle's not a square. I mean, that's kind of how I envision it in my
I've
mind.
still never understood that. I got to, kind of think through that.
Okay, we'll have a lesson later.
So we will change boundaries of the county to boundaries of the district.
I mean, I think it should literally be the same sentence as the board is composed of 7 members who reside within the boundaries of the district,
Period.
period.
Yep.
Start adding too many words and then it can get.
Yeah.
We're gonna, that last sentence, first paragraph, we're gonna keep the sentence as it used to be. So it'll say, the board is composed of 7 members who reside within the boundaries of the district.
Now, and this is a point of clarification for me. The very last sentence of the 4th paragraph, or last sentence of the policy, board members acting as individuals have no authority over personnel or school affairs except when such authority is specifically delegated to a member by the board. When does that happen?
My only thought is like whenever we, for example, in December, we voted on Jada and Anne Marie to vote for us.
Mm-hmm.
So individually, just the 2 of them they're not a quorum, they're not.
Okay.
That would be my only, just a thought.
Are there any other times?
Well, I don't know, let me think.
Because the question would be,
Well, for example, this particular ad hoc committee,
Right.
I
There's
don't know
only
if that's
3
authority.
Mhm.
I mean, you might argue this is not authority, but, I mean, you were bestowed this task as a sub-part of the board that the board voted on. That's going to design policy that helps drive, now again, ultimately the board votes on it, but you have been bestowed a special task. I don't know if you count that or not, but
Well, and so it brings up that point. It says, when such authority is specifically delegated to a member by the board. Okay, so it's saying, that sentence is saying that the board itself has to act to bestow that authority onto an individual member. Is that how you read that?
Yes.
Okay, okay. I didn't know if we needed additional qualifier. But it implies the board is taking action itself.
That's
Okay.
how I read it, but, yeah.
Specifically delegated to a member by
By the
an
board.
action of the board?
I think you say by the board is,
By the board?
I think, because the board has to take action to do that. They have to vote.
Exactly. So it's implied.
Yeah.
So we don't have to specify. Okay.
I mean, I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
Okay.
What? Dr. Guyton, did that just
I
happen?
mean, was that like
I mean,
a,
that was
I
like
think,
I think-
6
I
minutes.
I think we're rolling now. I think we're-
All right. Well, and that one's pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's defined by,
law?
I mean, that's, law really
Yeah.
walks through that. And so I'd be really cautious about changing too much
Yeah,
language there
I
because.
don't have any desire to change a whole lot there, other than,
This next one, BBA, is also another one that was recently updated.
In 317, yeah.
Yeah.
okay. All right, so next one, BBA, Board Powers and Duties. We will, you have in front of you again the current policy, and then that as proposed by School Board Association. And comments, questions, observations?
And I think some of these are outlined even further in other policies.
They are.
Like, so the quasi judicial, the board's responsible for hearing appeals of professional and support staff members, parents, legal guardians. I'm pretty sure that's like even detailed more in other places. But I've been reading a whole lot, so maybe it's.
Well, just as an aside, under executive, you're using the term employee, and you utilize that same one.
Correct.
That's the language
Yep.
you used earlier.
Mhm. And then like under operational, responsible for carrying out board business such as adopting procedures for meetings, electing board officers. So, but adopting procedures for meetings, would that fall somewhere under a policy? Or is that just procedures for meetings? Under the operational action, it says, the board is responsible for carrying out board business such as adopting procedures for meetings, electing board officers. But is that different than a policy? Like, policy for board meetings?
Yeah, I think it's further delineated, and I think that's really when we start to get into the administrative rules, some of the proposed administrative rules and things that you'll see there that give some specificity to that sort of generic term of adopting procedures for meetings. I mean, that seems fairly generic, but then there are additional ones to come, additional specificities to that to come.
Can I,
Go ahead.
well, there's one sentence that is not abundantly clear based upon our earlier conversation. Under appraisal and approval, the last sentence there, the board will hold the superintendent accountable for furnishing complete information necessary for the board's evaluation. I think we either need to say of the superintendent, or is it the board's evaluation of itself and the superintendent?
I see what you're saying. The board is responsible for requiring. Board will- Yeah. No, I think for your evaluation, because it says the board will appraise the superintendent's recommendations and act on each proposal.
So I
don't
read
know.
that as the superintendent brings before the board policies and potentially operational changes, whatever may occur, for the board's consideration. And that is saying it's upon the superintendent to provide the board with the enough information, or how does it say it?
Oh, I see what you're saying. It's
For
not about
complete
evaluation
information.
anyway, it's about evaluation of the proposal.
Of the proposal itself. That's how I read that. Now, we may need to specify that. But that's how I perceive that. So,
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Can I just get an of phrase in there? just think-
Right, yeah, I see what you're saying. So, but do we need to somehow put those last two sentences together? Okay. The board will appraise the superintendent's recommendations and act on each.
board will approve the superintendent's recommendation to act on each proposal in the district's best interest upon being provided complete information necessary for the board's evaluation.
Yes, so something like that, so that we know the board's evaluation of the superintendent's recommendations,
Yes.
not the evaluation of him or us, but
Yeah, because that.
future recommendations for policy.
Yeah, after we've been talking about superintendent evaluation
Yeah.
and board evaluation.
all right here.
It
Yeah.
all kind of,
Yeah.
it kind of
Yeah.
narrows you in to say, all right, which evaluation? And we're actually talking about neither.
Neither,
We're
right.
We're talking about the proposal at hand at a meeting.
So the board will
Yes.
hold the superintendent accountable for furnishing complete information necessary for the board's evaluation
Of the
superintendent's
superintendent's recommendations.
And I think that's all I'd say, of the superintendent's recommendations.
Yes.
Okay, yep.
So how exactly is that gonna read? Is it gonna be 2 or 3 sentences under that section?
So stay as 3.
I think you're just adding the of phrase at the end of that third sentence.
Of the superintendent's recommendations. Okay. I'm
You're
fine
just
with
going back to,
that. The previous sentence,
you're
So
saying
we're-
it's the evaluation of the recommendations, not the
gotcha.
evaluation of the board or
Or
the
you,
superintendent's
yeah.
evaluation.
Are you good with that, Tracy? Got it? Okay. All right, so here we go, educational planning and evaluation. We're getting back into educational program
Twice.
twice.
Not once, but twice.
So do we need to look at language change there?
I would just make things plural. Like, educational programs, or, what was the word we used previously?
We've talked environment, we've talked experiences.
I just think
Experiences.
environment works for the second
Yeah.
one of these really well. Educational environment will be evaluated regularly.
Yeah,
As
I
measured
would
through
agree.
the goals and objectives set forth by the board. Establishing educational goals.
So the
Improvement of
goals direct
educational-
the programs, is the way this reads. But I don't think you can take it as a singular. I think you have to take it as plural.
Yep.
So again, you're going from the generic to the specific.
So goals, plural, programs, plural.
Of the district. The educational environment will be evaluated regularly as measured through the goals and objectives set forth by the board.
Mhm. I don't know. I hear what you're saying with environment. The educational success will be evaluated regularly as measured through the goals and objectives. So like we've got our goals and
Effectiveness.
objectives.
Educational effectiveness.
Effectiveness, yeah, I'm thinking something, not, yeah. Effectiveness based off of this. I like that word.
Okay. Good with that?
Mm-hmm.
So educational effectiveness.
Right. I was thinking on a more positive note with successes. But yes, effectiveness will be evaluated regularly as measured through what we were just talking about, the goals and objectives set forth by the board.
I wonder if this last sentence doesn't need some level of a qualifier. It says the board is responsible for requiring and acquiring reliable information to make informed decisions. The board is responsible for requiring and acquiring as provided by the district.
Well, maybe put the board is responsible for requiring and acquiring from the district or reliable. Yeah, from the district needs to be in there somewhere. The board is responsible for requiring and acquiring reliable information from the district to make informed decisions.
Yeah, I think there's got to be something in there, because otherwise it leaves this question mark of, well, how am I going to go source that information, regarding the specific to the educational programs, the educational effectiveness. There has to be an author of that source, and so the obvious author of that source is going to be the district.
I'd say from.
That's
probably the best phrase, from the district.
the board is responsible for requiring and acquiring reliable information from the district to make informed decisions.
Yes.
Okay. Here's our oversee word. So again, tying back, the board will oversee the district's finances by authorizing, appropriating, but again, we throw into this educational program
Now, this was a really big, I wouldn't say really big change. It just, all of these things so far, they've taken a good bit of our current policy and changed it. This one was just a total change. So the previous one says, the board will adopt the annual budget, which will provide the resources in terms of facilities, personnel, materials, equipment, and programs to enable the school system to carry out its mission. And then it's just a totally different. The new one says the board will oversee the district's finances by authorizing, appropriating, and adopting a budget. Okay, so I guess there's the budget. And by proposing tax levies or bond elections. I guess that kind of gets into more of the financial responsibility other than just the annual budget.
Yeah, I actually
So,
like that
yeah,
because the way the first one is written,
it just
it's
focuses
like,
on the
okay, well,
budget.
where's the money coming from?
Right,
I mean, you've got to have some idea of, if you're going to provide a budget, you have to provide the appropriate revenue for that budget. And so where does the board derive and the district derive money? It is through tax levies and bond elections is how we derive the
okay, I do
revenue.
like the extra details.
So I think it did need a qualifier there.
And then should we say programs at the end?
Actually, I think I would stop it at the operation of the district, period.
Oh,
Because
yes,
you
because
read-
there's so much more than just,
Well, you read it earlier, I mean, read the previous one,
right, to carry out our mission.
it does all those other things.
Yes,
I think we'll
right.
just say the district and call it a day.
I would agree.
Okay,
Because the operation of the
Yeah.
district, the educational program is part of that.
right.
But you could also say, and this is where, I mean, this may be semantics, right? But the HVAC unit at ABC school is an important part of what we have to, what we may have to do or whatever it may look like. And so, yes, that's part of the educational program because you can't have education without that HVAC unit, but it's not textbooks or curriculum
Right,
or,
yeah.
Human resources. I would
like
just
that.
say the operation of the district, and then the educational program really
Falls
resides
under that, yeah.
underneath the operation of the district.
Yep, I concur. You good with that?
Cool.
And I didn't have any other suggestions.
Staffing? Because again, we're getting district's educational program.
So I definitely know, and just correct me if I'm wrong. So the second sentence, the board is also responsible for establishing salary schedules, terms of employment, and other personnel policies. Okay, but the sentence before that, the board is responsible for employing the professional and support staff necessary for carrying out. So I guess we employ them when we approve their hires. Do you see what I'm saying?
I see it more as we approve.
Right. Because,
Well, but all right, now we're gonna, let's wade into it here. We got
Yeah.
about 8 minutes left, so I wanna make sure I get on this. But in essence, by approving the budget that you've approved, that has all the staffing recommendations.
right. So I guess I'm just trying to say, it says the board is responsible for employing the professional and support staff. Is that the wording we want to use here? Because
Well, in terms of, and this is actually a little different.
you're
So
our employee.
Well, for professional staff,
Mm-hmm.
they don't start
Correct.
without your approval.
Board has
approval.
to take action.
Now, support staff, what's the word we use?
Oh, what's the language we use for that? I know,
But it's not a condition of employment, because otherwise,
It's not a condition of employment, but it has become there is an approval process that exists for that, or I forget the
no,
terminology.
your
the exact
word,
terminology.
there's
Not
a,
approval.
Tracy, what is it, the support staff?
I'm trying to,
Remember, we added that to the whole thing, what was it called? There was one specific word. I've never played Wordle, but this feels like Wordle in my head is what we're. Anyway, you provide agreement, but it's not a condition of employment. because if it were a condition of
For the
employment,
staff, yes.
it could be weeks before you hire the custodian that they needed,
Yep.
Correct.
you know,
right.
3 or 4 weeks ago. So I would ratify.
Ratify,
Thank
yes.
you.
Ratification.
I'd just say, I think you could say the district is responsible for employing the professional staff and for ratifying the support staff necessary for carrying out
The district's
the
education.
district's, and again, there's program again, but you could say the district's whatever,
Duties or whatever.
work or
yeah.
whatever. The board is also responsible for, then the next one
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I
But-
just didn't, yeah, employing support staff, just, I wasn't
Yeah.
sure if it was
I would
worded
agree
the
with
right
that.
way.
Because there's an approval and then there's a ratification.
Yes.
And they are differed by the professional versus the support. And so I do think there is in order to maintain consistent language throughout, because we have adopted a new policy regarding that, in order to maintain that same language or to be consistent with that language, you need to have that here as well.
I think it's okay to break it up.
Yep.
Yeah,
I would
I
agree.
think so too. I agree.
You gonna read that out loud, Tracy? Here, I'll try again.
That's okay.
The board is responsible for employing the professional staff and ratifying the support staff necessary for carrying out the district's work.
The district's work.
I mean,
Yeah,
that-
yeah.
it lacks panache
It
or something,
does,
but I think it still
it's what we're
captures
trying to
what it
say.
is.
Yeah.
Board is responsible for employing professional staff and ratifying the support staff necessary for carrying out the district's
Work.
Yeah.
Because that's what you do as an
I mean,
employee.
Yeah,
You
you
work.
carry out the district's work. Yeah,
Work.
I mean, it's not fancy, but it's
Does
what we're
the
trying to
job.
say, yeah. Mhm.
Cool.
I think the rest of it is good.
Reviewing action. So, I mean, I'm just clarifying personally for myself here. Where it says the board has final authority within the law for the operation of the district, like literally we could, I mean, seems very powerful.
Well, I mean.
But we could, for the
I
operation of the
think- I
district,
really think this is the catch-all one,
just that we can,
like if there's something else.
yeah, it just seems
but
so
don't-
broad.
Well, I mean, you're not gonna, I mean, I don't know how many pages of state law are dedicated to school boards,
Right,
but I imagine that this policy is trying to capture that.
okay,
And I think basically what it's saying is it's not really limited to all these things, as long as it's within the law for you to take action.
okay,
So my guess is it falls under that, is not limited to phrase that you sometimes get, like, these are the responsibility, but they're not limited to these things, especially if something changes.
and the visits to schools, and-
That captures what our current practice.
Yep, so that would be through the filter of the way in which we're now conducting.
with
board
the new
visits.
form, Google, like form and,
But at the same time, also provides flexibility in the future if that process were to change.
Yeah, because the stuff about coordination with staff, including superintendent, building level administration, we would do that anyway.
whether it's a.
Whether it was the whole group or
visiting
individual
or-
groups.
Correct.
Mhm.
And it is a little more expanded than what we currently have, which is, but it also incorporates previous language. And then public relations, same sort of thing, keeping the community informed, providing opportunities for public engagement. Again, these are very generic, and specificity comes later. And so I do interpret
Right,
that.
the specific public engagement is in another policy that we'll
correct.
discuss in more depth.
And again, too, this section is also heavily controlled by South Carolina Code of Law. And so, again, we do want to be a little careful about wordsmithing too much there. Okay. So does that complete BBA? Is everybody satisfied with that?
Correct.
And Dr. Guyton, just a time check, it is
It is 2
2
o'clock.
o'clock.
So
We made it
we
through 4.
have completed 4. And so, on completion of this, would we like to go ahead and set our next meeting?
Yes, and so just clarifying, these 4, we will bring to the board at our March meeting and then vote on them in April.
Correct. So it'll
But
be a two-step
hopefully,
process.
yeah, but then hopefully by our April meeting, we'll vote on these 4 and then be able to bring the next
Bring in
6.
another group.
So it's constantly.
Correct. Which, honestly, with Tim not being here, I'm almost a little hesitant and
To set the date.
I would say, maybe within the next couple weeks. I mean, we do need to stay kind of working through this
Yeah.
continually. So I would say, let's look at 2 weeks from now, a couple weeks from now. If we can coordinate that with Tim as well, and start to develop an idea. Yes, we do in fact need.
Oh,
So let's see.
the remaining 6 that we didn't discuss.
Yep, hold on 1 second. Do I hear a motion to table policies? 1 second, please. To table policies BBAA, BC, BCA, BCB, BD, and BDD until the next ad hoc meeting.
I make a motion to table BBA, BC, BCA, BCB, BD, and BDD till our next session.
I will second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I agree. Any opposed? Motion carries. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Any discussion? We are now adjourned. Thank you.